We've all heard the Titanic was unsinkable, right? But what if I told you it was destined to sink long before it hit that iceberg? This is the untold story of how ambition, greed, and overconfidence sealed the fate of the world's most famous ship. It's 1912. The world is in the grip of rapid industrialization. The Titanic, a colossal engineering feat, is about to set sail. Towering over the docks in Belfast, this ship is unlike anything the world has seen before. Over 882 feet long, it promises an unparalleled mix of luxury and safety. With its lavish interiors and cutting-edge technology, it's more than a ship. It's a symbol of human progress. On board are over 2,000 people, from wealthy elites like John Jacob Astor IV to immigrants seeking new lives in America. It's not just a journey across the Atlantic, it's a journey of dreams, ambition, and hope. But as we'll uncover, this hope is built on shaky foundations. The Titanic's tragic story isn't just about the iceberg. It's about the decisions and events leading up to that fateful night. This isn't just a story of a ship sinking. It's a story about humanity's hubris and the price of overlooking the cracks in our own creations. The build-up to disaster. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a monument to human ambition. It represented the height of the Industrial Revolution, a time when technology seemed unstoppable and the world believed progress could overcome any obstacle. At the heart of this ambition was the White Star Line, a company locked in fierce competition with its rival, Cunard. Cunard had already stunned the world with its record-breaking ships, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. These were the fastest ships on the Atlantic, and White Star needed something to eclipse them. But instead of competing on speed, White Star's managing director, J. Bruce Ismay, chose to focus on size and luxury. This decision gave birth to the Olympic-class liners, with the Titanic as its crowning jewel. Designed by naval architect Thomas Andrews and constructed at Harland and Wolff's shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, the Titanic was a marvel. At over 46,000 tons, it was the largest moving object ever built, boasting cutting-edge safety features that included 16 watertight compartments and state-of-the-art steel construction. But the Titanic wasn't just about engineering, it was about opulence. The ship featured a grand staircase adorned with intricate ironwork and a glass dome. First-class passengers dined on gourmet meals in a French-inspired dining room, while enjoying amenities like a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, and even a gymnasium. This wasn't a ship, it was a floating palace. However, beneath the glamour and grandeur, cracks were already forming, both figuratively and literally. To meet deadlines and keep costs low, compromises were made. The steel used for the hull contained high levels of sulfur, making it brittle in cold temperatures. The rivets, crucial for holding the ship together, were made from substandard iron in some areas. These weaknesses weren't visible to the naked eye, but they were ticking time bombs. Then there was the issue of lifeboats. The Titanic was designed to carry up to 64 lifeboats, enough for everyone on board. But to preserve deck space and maintain the ship's aesthetic appeal, only 20 lifeboats were installed, enough for about half the passengers and crew. At the time, regulations didn't require more, but this decision would become one of the most haunting aspects of the disaster. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic set sail from Southampton, England, to New York City. Its passengers were a microcosm of society, from the wealthiest elites in first class to working-class immigrants in third class. Everyone on board had one thing in common. They believed they were part of something extraordinary. But as the Titanic left port, so did the seeds of its downfall. The world's most luxurious ship was already carrying the weight of human ambition, engineering flaws, and economic pressures. The night of the sinking. The Titanic's fourth night at sea began like any other. The passengers enjoyed lavish meals, the first-class diners socializing in the ship's ornate salons, while third-class families gathered in the more modest but still comfortable spaces below deck. The weather was unusually calm, with the Atlantic as still as glass. But beneath the serenity lay a lurking danger, a field of icebergs, invisible in the moonless night. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, the calm was shattered. Frederick Fleet, a lookout stationed in the crow's nest, spotted something ominous, an iceberg dead ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times and phoned the bridge. "Iceberg, right ahead," he shouted. First Officer William Murdoch, on duty at the time, ordered the ship to turn hard to port and reverse its engines. But the Titanic, massive and moving at 22 knots, couldn't maneuver quickly enough. Moments later, the iceberg scraped along the starboard side, creating a series of gashes below the waterline. At first, the collision seemed minor. Many passengers didn't even feel the impact, while others described it as nothing more than a slight shudder. But down in the boiler rooms, the situation was dire. Water began pouring in, flooding 5 of the ship's watertight compartments. Titanic's design allowed it to stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, but 5 meant certain doom. Captain Edward Smith, alerted to the situation, was faced with an impossible decision. The ship was sinking, slowly but inevitably. He ordered the lifeboats to be prepared and sent officers to rouse the passengers. But the crew was untrained for such an emergency, and confusion spread rapidly. On deck, the chaos began to unfold. There were only 20 lifeboats, capable of carrying about 1,178 people, while over 2,200 were on board. The women and children first policy caused further delays, as officers struggled to enforce it amid growing panic. Lifeboats were launched half full, and many passengers refused to believe the ship was sinking at all. Meanwhile, below deck, third-class passengers were trapped behind locked gates meant to separate them from the upper decks. Their cries for help would become one of the most haunting aspects of the tragedy. By 1:30 a.m., the situation had turned desperate. The bow was fully submerged, and the ship's stern began to rise out of the water. The once grand Titanic was now breaking apart under its own weight. Survivors later described the final moments as deafening, with the ship's machinery and fittings collapsing as the hull split in 2. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic disappeared beneath the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Over 1,500 people were left in the freezing sea, clinging to debris or desperately calling for help. But the cold was merciless. Within minutes, most succumbed to hypothermia, their voices fading into silence. The RMS Carpathia, a nearby ship, arrived hours later to rescue the survivors, pulling just over 700 people from lifeboats. For the rest, it was too late. The Titanic, once a symbol of human ingenuity, was now a graveyard beneath the waves. The hidden causes. The sinking of the Titanic is often attributed to the iceberg alone, but the truth is far more complex. The disaster was the result of a perfect storm of human errors, engineering flaws, and systemic issues. First, consider the design flaws. The Titanic was marketed as unsinkable due to its watertight compartments, but this claim was more illusion than reality. The compartments were not fully sealed at the top. Water could spill from one to the next like a series of cascading dominoes. This flaw turned what could have been a manageable situation into a catastrophic failure. Then there were the materials used in construction. Metallurgical analysis of the Titanic's steel and rivets, conducted decades later, revealed significant weaknesses. The steel was high in sulfur, making it brittle in cold temperatures, while some rivets were made from substandard iron. Under the frigid conditions of the North Atlantic, these materials became more susceptible to failure. Human error also played a critical role. The Titanic's crew had received multiple warnings about icebergs in the area, but failed to reduce speed. Captain Edward Smith, a seasoned mariner on his final voyage before retirement, chose to maintain a near-maximum speed of 22 knots despite the risks. The decision was partly driven by pressure to arrive in New York on schedule, highlighting how ambition and competition overshadowed caution. Even the ship's lookout team was hampered by a small yet crucial oversight. They didn't have binoculars. A key to their storage cabinet was missing, leaving the crew reliant on their unaided eyesight to spot dangers in the dark. By the time the iceberg was seen, it was too late to maneuver effectively. The failure to fill lifeboats to capacity added another layer of tragedy. Lifeboat drills had been canceled earlier in the voyage, and the crew lacked proper training to handle such an emergency. Many passengers didn't understand the gravity of the situation until it was too late. further delaying evacuation. Finally, consider the regulatory environment. At the time, maritime safety laws were outdated, requiring lifeboats for only a fraction of the people on board large ships. The Titanic's design adhered to these lax regulations, but in hindsight, it was woefully inadequate. The iceberg was the final blow, but the Titanic's fate was sealed long before it set sail. Overconfidence in technology, a culture of speed and spectacle, and a series of preventable errors all combined to create a disaster of unimaginable scale. The aftermath. When the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves, it left behind a scene of unimaginable devastation. Over 1,500 lives were lost, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. The survivors, just over 700, were left drifting in lifeboats, freezing and traumatized, waiting for rescue. The RMS Carpathia, the ship that responded to the Titanic's distress calls, arrived at the scene at approximately 4 a.m., 2 hours after the Titanic had sunk. The crew worked tirelessly to pull survivors from lifeboats, offering blankets, warm drinks, and what little comfort they could. Captain Arthur Rostron of the Carpathia was later hailed as a hero for his swift actions, but for most of the Titanic's passengers, it was too late. The news of the disaster stunned the world. The Titanic had been a symbol of progress, wealth, and human ingenuity, and its loss was unthinkable. Headlines around the globe described the tragedy in harrowing detail, and public outrage quickly turned to demands for answers. In the weeks that followed, both the United States and the United Kingdom launched inquiries into the sinking. Testimonies from survivors, crew members, and White Star Line executives revealed the chain of decisions and oversights that contributed to the disaster. The inquiries also unearthed heart-wrenching accounts of bravery and sacrifice, such as the story of the ship's band, who played music to calm passengers as the Titanic went down. The disaster also had profound social implications. The stories of third-class passengers being denied access to lifeboats sparked outrage, highlighting the stark inequalities of the era. The sinking became a symbol of the arrogance of wealth and the indifference to the struggles of the less fortunate. On a more practical level, the Titanic disaster forced immediate changes in maritime safety. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, was established in 1914, setting new standards for lifeboat capacity, emergency procedures, and ship inspections. Ships were now required to maintain 24-hour radio communication, and ice patrols were established to monitor iceberg-prone areas in the Atlantic. But beyond the regulations, the Titanic became a cultural touchstone, its story retold in books, films, and exhibits. For many, it remains a haunting reminder of the cost of human ambition and the fragility of life in the face of nature's power. Legacy and lessons. Over a century later, the Titanic remains more than just a shipwreck. It's a symbol, a cautionary tale, and a source of endless fascination. Its story resonates because it speaks to universal themes: the dangers of hubris, the fragility of human life, and the unforeseen consequences of technological ambition. For decades, the Titanic lay untouched at the bottom of the Atlantic, shrouded in mystery. It wasn't until 1985, when oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard and his team discovered the wreck, that the full extent of the disaster became visible. The haunting images of the ship's broken hull and scattered artifacts brought the tragedy back into sharp focus, reminding the world of the lives lost on that fateful night. The Titanic's story has inspired countless works of art, from the best-selling accounts of survivors to James Cameron's iconic 1997 film. These portrayals have kept the ship's legacy alive, ensuring that its lessons are never forgotten. One of the most enduring lessons is the need for humility in the face of nature. The Titanic was billed as unsinkable, but the iceberg didn't care about human boasts or engineering marvels. The disaster reminds us that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, we are still vulnerable to forces beyond our control. Another lesson is the importance of preparedness. The lack of lifeboats, inadequate training, and overconfidence in safety measures were all preventable factors that turned a bad situation into a catastrophe. Today, these lessons inform everything from maritime safety to disaster preparedness in other fields. But perhaps the Titanic's most poignant legacy is its human dimension. The stories of courage, sacrifice, and heartbreak remind us of the best and worst of humanity. From crew members who stayed behind to help others escape, to families torn apart in the chaos, the Titanic's tale is ultimately about people, ordinary and extraordinary, caught in extraordinary circumstances. The Titanic's legacy isn't just about what went wrong. It's about what we've learned and how we've grown since. It's a reminder that progress should never come at the cost of safety, that human lives are worth more than ambition, and that in the face of disaster, our shared humanity is our greatest strength. The Titanic's story isn't just about a ship, it's about an era, a tragedy, and the enduring lessons it left behind. As we look back on that cold April night in 1912, we're reminded of the fragility of even our greatest achievements. The Titanic may be gone, but its legacy endures, a powerful testament to the need for humility, preparation, and compassion in the face of the unknown.